Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are covering the ending of Shazam, right? So the title was basically canceled with issue number 15. The issue number 14, this one that we're covering here, is the last one written by Geoff Johns, and then issue number 15 is written by somebody else, and I don't really know who it is. It's kind of disappointing, but it also sort of makes sense at the same time. Shazam is a really cool title, and he's a really cool character. The issue is that the comic was just plagued with like delays and inconsistent artistry and things like that, and it was enough to just kind of turn people off to it, and so people just ended up more or less walking away. If it had received kind of the normal fare of comic book treatment that we were used to, which is to say Geoff Johns writing it consistently and a consistent artist, it probably would have lasted about twice as many issues, if not more. But the result is that, like so many years before, Shazam's just not really able to hold his own title, right? It's just one of those instances where it kind of comes to an end. The cool thing about this is that we do get a really interesting ending here and probably a massive cliffhanger. I'm kind of curious to see what you guys think about this. But for those of you guys playing catch up here, because it has been a little while since we covered this, what we end up doing here is picking up with the arrival of Superboy Prime. Now, what Geoff Johns did not explain is how Superboy Prime went from being trapped in the Source Wall at some point in time to being in the Monster Lands, right? Part of the 7 Magic Lands, which holds some of the most violent beings that exist out there in the DC magical universe. We do know the Source Wall was broken at some point in time, but we know that Superboy Prime was trapped in it at one point. We just didn't really find out how any of this worked, and we still don't, right? We still don't really get an explanation in terms of what happened between the time that Superboy Prime escaped the Source Wall and the time that he ended up in the Monster Lands, right? We just simply know he was being held there as a prisoner at some point. Now, the other part of this is Mr. Mind. As we know that we had Billy Batson's father who basically showed up on his doorstep one day looking for his son and looking to basically reunite. More recently, we learned that Mr. Mind was in possession of Billy Batson's father. And so the idea was that he wanted to use him as his own host so that Billy would basically share his power with his father, which Mr. Mind knew he would inevitably do. And then Mr. Mind would basically be in possession of the power of Shazam and use it for his own ends. And that's really what happened here. When Billy Batson became aware of that, he basically used a shrinking spell and then went inside his father's own head to basically face off against Mr. Mind. And the battle is not anything grandiose, right? It's not a great big huge battle like what we saw during Final Crisis or Infinite Crisis where he was like consuming universes or something like that. It really isn't anything like that. Instead, it's pretty small. You know, Shazam showing up here, he faces off against Mr. Mind. Mr. Mind uses a few magic tricks here and there and manages to get the upper hand on Billy occasionally. But the big thing about this is that Mr. Mind tries to play on Billy's view of his father, in the sense that Mind basically says, your father would never have been here had I not brought him here, right? That basically the whole reason why Billy Batson's father's here is because somewhere along the line, Mr. Mind possessed him, and Mr. Mind brought him here, right? He basically drove him to be here. We'll get a little more detail about that later on, but basically he's like, your father doesn't love you, right? Your father doesn't love you, and he never really did. Now, on the surface, this looks like Mr. Mind quite literally playing mind games with Billy Batson. Billy doesn't really fall for it, and for the most part, goes and attacks Mr. Mind, and once he basically destroys his voice box, Mr. Mind can't really use any spells because he can't actually speak. And this leads to, you know, Billy Batson basically overpowering him and for the most part taking out Mr. Mind. Now, when that happens, you end up having all these different members of the Monster Lands who basically collapse, save for Superboy Prime, right? He's the only one that's kind of left standing here. And so with all the other Shazam family members there, along with Black Adam, you have Billy Batson who basically escapes, he uses a spell book, he brings himself back to his normal size, and then Superboy Prime jumps in. Now, Superboy Prime immediately faces off against the Shazam family and basically takes them all out. But the funny thing about this is that none of them know who Superboy Prime is, and Billy Batson doesn't know who he is. Now, there's an existing theory that's going around on the internet that basically says that this entire Shazam Rebirth run takes place after Doomsday Clock. And for the most part, Superboy Prime did have a little bit of post-Flashpoint action, but for the most part, he hasn't really come across Billy Batson yet. And so in the post-Flashpoint universe, what it looks like is Billy Batson doesn't know who Superboy Prime is, despite the fact that before the events of Flashpoint, Superboy Prime fought pretty much all the superhero teams and wrecked them by himself. Wrecked all of them by himself, right? It took the combined efforts of like all the Flashes to run him into the Speed Force and keep him trapped, and then he basically escaped, right? He ended up getting out of, through unexplained means, and then they had to fly. It took 2 Supermen flying him through a red sun and then crashing him onto a planet, and then he was taken prisoner by the Green Lanterns. There's a lot of history there between Superboy Prime and the superhero community, but he basically overpowers Shazam. The other thing that I want to point out here is that Superboy Prime is likely in a weakened state here, and the reason why is because when he was in the Monster Lands and he was being kept prisoner, there was a red sun orb there that was keeping his power suppressed. And for the most part, like any other Kryptonian out there, despite the fact that there are weaknesses weaknesses that Kryptonians normally have that Superboy Prime doesn't have. He's been exposed to a red sun all this time. It takes time for his energy to start building up. So I would say, had this fight taken place at a later period, had Superboy Prime escaped and then waited a few weeks, he probably would have overpowered the Shazam family quick, fast, and in a hurry. But such as it is, he's basically in a depowered state. And so what you end up getting is that where he goes to face off against Shazam, that suddenly you have Black Adam who jumps into it, right? Black Adam jumps into the fray, and you initially have Black Adam who tells Billy, get your hands on that book, say the spell you need to say in order to get everything from the Wildlands back to where it's supposed to be. We can get our world back to normal, you know, this town back to normal. But before they can, Superboy Prime jumps back into the fray again. So you end up getting Black Adam and Shazam who actually team up to face off against Superboy Prime. And this is cool because one of the things that you see here is that Superboy Prime's power is actually increasing as he fights. And it's one of those things that you don't really get to see that often with his character, right? He becomes more powerful as he fights. And that's exactly what's going on. Because remember, throughout all of this, he's absorbing solar radiation from the sun, right? So his powers are increasing as time goes on. And so what it ends up taking is really Shazam and Black Adam both saying the word Shazam at the same time in order to bring him down. Now, Black Adam has reservations about this, right? He's like, if I say that, I'm going to go back to being my old self and I'm going to turn to dust, right? Like that's the caveat of Black Adam. If he ever says the word Shazam, he'll basically revert back to an old man and he'll die, right? Because he's just so incredibly old that his normal body shouldn't really be alive at this point and it would just kind of dissolve. And so where this kind of explanation is given, the response of Shazam is, if you trust me, then I will give you a portion of my power and I will give you enough energy to where you could say Shazam and revert back to your superhero self so you can survive the transition. And so when that happens, they basically both go flying at Superboy Prime and shout Shazam at the same time. And that's enough magical energy that it basically, you know, it doesn't really kill Superboy Prime, but it effectively knocks him out. And so of course you have Black Adam who basically just kind of starts breaking down, and then Billy Batson sticks his hand out, says Shazam, and basically turns him back into Black Adam again. And you get this kind of explanation that's really more of an epilogue. That's one of the things I didn't really like about this, is the fight between Shazam and Superboy Prime ended like that, right? It ended so incredibly fast. And it's like kind of disappointing. And it was kind of disappointing in terms of how fast it ended, right? Like I felt like it probably should have gone on a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, this is not really a crisis event. So it's not really designed to have this whole crazy situation. However, as I've been told, or at least as I've been seen, Superboy Prime is going to face off against the Batman Who Laughs. I don't know if that's true, but that's supposedly what's supposed to take place. If anybody can confirm that, then let me know down in the comments section, but that's supposedly what's supposed to happen, which I'm actually excited to see, like a super amped up Superboy Prime facing off against the Batman Who Laughs. That sounds amazing. Like it sounds so cool. But with everything kind of going back to the way that it was supposed to, by Shazam basically using the book to kind of send all the different monsters back to their own particular realms. He also kind of says that he'll try to help those realms as best he can, right? He'll basically be a superhero for those different places. And so what it also does is it allows his father to kind of return back to normal, right? To go back to his normal self. And this is when Billy learns that Mr. Mind was right the entire time, that when he goes to greet his father doesn't know who he is. He's like, the last I remember, I was in Chicago. Like, why am I here in Philadelphia? He's like, who in the world are you, right? He doesn't recognize who Shazam is. And Shazam's like, I'm just the superhero resident. There was some kind of an incident. And he asks him, like, you know, can I ask you something about your son? And he's like, what about my son? He's like, your son, Billy. He's like, how do you possibly know about him? And Shazam asks, have you been searching for your son? And the response of his father is, no, we gave that up a long time ago, right? Like, we weren't really the parenting types. We weren't really getting along. I mean, she's an absolute mess, you know, but like, I'm better off without him and without that kid, and he's better off without me. I don't want to find him. I don't want to know him. I don't want to have anything to do with him. And then basically just starts to go back home. And is where Billy Batson gets completely shut down by the fact that his father really doesn't seem to care about him. It's like his mom, you know, from the Shazam movie. His mom didn't care, right? His mom didn't care about him or anything. She just didn't want to have anything to do with him. And that's a crushing experience, but it's, you know, particularly important here because where the Shazam family comforts Billy Batson the way that we would expect, Black Adam almost kind of does the same thing. He doesn't really look at him with anger the way that he normally would. He looks at him with sadness. He looks at him with a kind of look like, damn, man, like this sucks, man. Like this is pretty rough. You know, this kid's dad basically just said, like, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Not knowing it was Billy, but he's like, I don't want to have anything to do with you and I don't really care much about you. So I'm just going to go home, go back to my life, whatever my life happens to be, and call it a day. And so there's a kind of truce that's formed here between Black Adam and Billy. Stay out of Kahndaq and everything will be okay. Basically, you stay away, I stay away, and that's basically it. We also get get a few little tidbits here, and that Superboy Prime was handed over to the Justice League, that Mr. Tawny, the owl, or I'm sorry, the cat, or the tiger rather, basically kind of hangs out with them for a while, and that's basically it. But you end up getting the Wizard who's looking at everything going on here, and who basically says that he now trusts Billy Batson, right? That he should have always trusted him. He kind of sees the error of his ways and not really trusting Billy the way that he should have, but he also says that Billy's greatest achievement will be the redemption of the 7th member of the Shazam family. And we kind of get this point where he says, like, I can see it, right? I can see all of them gathered together. We end up finding out that at some point along the line in the future, Black Adam is actually going to join the Shazam family, that he's going to become a part of that group. Now, if I'm a betting man, this is because of the Black Adam movie, right? This is the reason why that's happening. That Black Adam will be an enemy of Shazam. They'll fight against each other in the Shazam, or in the Black Adam film. We'll kind of get his origin. Who knows? Who really has any idea how that's going to play out? But at some point in the DC cinematic universe, Black Adam's going to ally himself with Shazam. And that's why you end up having this here, right? I don't know with any absolute certainty, but that more or less kind of seems to be the case, right? DC Comics basically laying the groundwork for what to expect in the future of the Shazam line of movies in the DC cinematic universe, right? So that's basically where things wrap up, guys. It's just kind of an end, you know, to this whole thing. Do I think it's a bit of a disappointing end? Yeah, I kind of do. I really kind of feel a bit disappointed with this. I feel like a lot more could have been done had it been given some legitimacy, right? Had it been given like legitimate artists that went on for a pretty good amount of time. I kind of feel like it was just sort of a background project being worked on by Geoff Johns while everything else was happening. I could be entirely wrong, and I probably am, but I have a hard time believing that if it was a main project that Geoff Johns was focusing on, that he could not have gotten a consistent artist for the story. And that it wouldn't feel like a background story, but it kind of does, right? It kind of just feels like something that was out there that DC had done, and now they're finished and now it's canceled, and that's basically it. Where Shazam goes from here, I have no earthly clue, right? I mean, I can cover issue number 15 if you guys want. I don't really know what the whole idea behind it is. Maybe it sets the stage for what comes next. I'm not really sure, but let me know down in the comment section. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.